I don't know if you have any other questions, but I wanted to see if the group wanted to react or have some questions.
Yeah, we'll open it up to questions then.
Yeah.
So how do you go by increasing your political base when you're dealing with a group of individuals who are basically apolitical or just apathetic in general?
We listen for the right way in our hearts to move forward. And I know that sounds abstract, but that's what we do. But on a very real level, you know, we do a lot of fun stuff too. I mean, we got all kinds of ways we engage our young people, whether it's through music, whether it's through, you know, different camps and getting our young people connected to the land again. A lot of the different training modules that we use, we always get our people out of the city, okay? We'll go to a retreat center somewhere, a boot camp, and we do our trainings, you know, for 5, 6, 7 days. Everybody's eating together, having a good time, learning some new skills, and it's a life-changing experience. And, you know, I think that, and everything in between, you know, you have to be very creative about it. I think that it also comes down to being able to effectively communicate your message and take little steps. You know, I'll use this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Keystone XL campaign. Did anybody see the Keystone XL decision
oh, yeah.
about Obama saying no to this pipeline?
Definitely.
Canada to Texas. Well, you know, that whole strategy is very, very significant. That whole victory is very significant. You know, if we look at the history of mega pipelines across the planet, and whether Africa or Eastern Europe,
Sochi.
in your backyard, or Southeast Asia, or in Latin America, it's kind of common knowledge in the foundation and activism world that pipeline campaigns don't get won. So the fact that a grassroots-led, nonviolent direct action campaign resulted in the president of the largest military power on the planet saying no to big oil is a huge and fundamental change that does require, you know, a step back to just kind of take it all in. I'm still in shock. But that said, you know, big oil plays shell games. You know, they're always moving shells around. You don't know where that little ball is, and you know they'll put a project away for 30 years, and then they'll come back 30 years later. 30 years later, after everybody who fought that project is dead, then they'll bring it right back. You know, this is how powerful and big these companies are. But for us, you know, we really mobilized right from Alberta, Canada to Texas, to Port Arthur, Texas, a massive base of citizens, you know, landowners, Native Americans, you know, people in Houston, and every stop in between, through a grassroots organizing strategy. You know, creating space in local communities, inviting people to come down, sharing some information, and then asking them how they felt about it, and asking them if they would be willing to take another step to come and help out at the next event. And it took time. It took 3 years to build it up to the point where last summer, in August, we invited, you know, people to Washington, D.C. to participate in the first sit-ins that had happened in this country since the 1960s civil rights movement. And in August, you know, we had over 1,500 people get arrested in front of the White House protesting the Keystone XL Pipeline. And this was the largest act of civil disobedience that this country had seen, you know, since the Vietnam War, since the civil rights movement. And it ended up turning the issue into the lightning rod of not just the environmental movement, but of a lot of social movements in this country. And the buzz, people are still buzzing off of it. There wasn't enough to win the campaign, though. So we went right back to organizing in our local communities, having town halls, getting people together, throwing fundraisers, you know, making music about it, you know. I don't know how many Keystone XL songs people made. And every, like, country song, and this song, that song. You know, making art, street art, you know, in every city. you know, really focused on pressuring President Obama to honor his commitments. You know, he said that this would be the time when we would end the tyranny of oil. You know, we would break America from its addiction to fossil fuel. That was his campaign promise. And from where IEN was coming from, he also promised that this would be an era when the red man could finally get ahead, man. You know, that was what was said at the inauguration speech by that elder. And, you know, and so we told Obama as Native Americans that, you know, we're not into this, and you have to respect our connection to the sacredness of Mother Earth. And this pipeline threatens that connection. You know, last month in November, or 2 months ago in November, at the White House Tribal Leaders Summit, you know, we had a block of chiefs, of tribal chairmen from Alberta to Oklahoma present President Obama with the Mother Earth Accord, which is signed by, you know, had over 60 pages of endorsements, including the main political opposition party in the federal government of Canada, saying, you know, and it outlined our unique tribal concerns. And, you know, and here we are a couple months later, and the decision was rendered. So I guess just to answer your question, it takes a lot of work to deal with the apathy. And for the most part, when we do social movement organizing, I don't waste my time with the soccer moms and the NASCAR dads. I really don't. You know? Does anybody know what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, they're comfortable. They're comfortable, God-fearing, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. If the law changes, they're going to follow it. What I'm interested in is people that are walking on the fence, that, you know, they feel uneasy about what's happening in America today. They feel that something is wrong. There's a great injustice in the world, and, you know, they're uneasy. Those are the people that I waste my energy on, you know, that are wavering on the fence. The people that are like, no way, man, Obama's full of BS, you're full of BS, I love big oil, we need it, it's a necessary evil. Okay, you know, I don't waste my time on those folks. I'm just being real. The folks that I waste my time on are people that are like, yes, I believe in this. This is going to help me too. You know, it's going to help my kids. You know, those are the people that I focus my time on. The ones that are apathetic, the door's always open to them. You know, there's a revolving door, and they can always come in again, you know, after they've gone back out, you know, once they become inspired to do so. But there's an old saying, you know, that they say, well, how does it go? You can lead a horse to water, you know, but you can't make that horse drink. So don't agitate over it. You know, horses are big. Don't fight with a horse.
Clayton, thank you for the information you gave us today. A lot of insight of some of the movements you've done. However, for us, the struggle for Circassians, with Sochi coming up, some analysts just recently stated that they're expecting military intervention by Russia. They're expecting bombings to be happening very soon in Sochi. It's a little different, Vancouver and Sochi.
Absolutely.
So from that 40,000-foot level of someone who had all these mobilizations of groups, how do you see this should be approached? Is this something that has to be done on the outside to make this this narrative more appealing for people to support?
I think what Zach's getting at is the fact that in Russia, all the civil society is awarded less freedom than they are anywhere in North America. So, you know, the major concern is that when Circassians in the Caucasus begin their protest, that they'll be dealt with very punitively. And so then the role of diaspora comes in. What's our part in this? Should, you know, if they're unable to do this because of the right situation where they live, is it our responsibility to take the reins on this issue as diaspora?
Well, first and foremost, you know, let me recognize it is a very, very different situation. The security culture in your homelands is such a different scenario than the subversive security culture in Canada, you know. That's not to say that Native people don't disappear all the times. I would even go as far as to say that the police probably have something to do with that. You know, we have, you know, over 50% of our incarcerated population is Native people. Meanwhile, we only make up 1.8 million of the 31 million people in the country. Is that because we're inherently evil and we like breaking the law? I would say no. It's because the system is rigged and systemically racist. That said, you know, in my briefing this evening, you know, I understand just the implications, or a little bit about them by the briefing, of just the intensity of that. Now, for those of you that are living here in the belly of the beast in the United States of America, do you have a responsibility to do everything that you can from here to highlight the narrative, the struggle of the people of your homelands, in the lead up to the Olympics and during, and then right, and then after, no matter what? Darn rights you do, you know? Darn rights you do. I think that London presents an interesting opportunity for escalating towards Sochi. There's an incredible amount of work that's been laid down already by your youth leaders. But there is a need, I think, for fundraising. You know, there is a need for further training. Also looking at other sections of your displaced population and organizing opportunities in those places, in Jordan, in Georgia, and where else?
Turkey.
Turkey. You know, and really looking at opportunities for that base there as well. And I think that London presents a promising area to be able to start framing a very concrete international campaign towards Sochi, which includes targeting the corporate sponsors. It's important to see what sponsors the Olympics in Sochi are Western, you know. Who are the Russian operators? I assume Gazprom will be probably the major.
They're the platinum.
Yeah, they'll be the platinum sponsor. But it's important to develop brand damage campaigns in those companies to, you know, to highlight the fact that they're profiting off of genocide, you know. And it's important to reach out to Olympians, to reach out to people that will have access to Sochi, that will be going, that can operate there in places where you might not necessarily be able to, you know. I think that that's a really important strategy as well. You know, and during Beijing, well, it was very difficult. I'm sure it'll be a very similar situation in your homeland. People went in there, solidarity activists. There were actions that were done, very high-profile actions that, you know, because of the intense security, got insane media, you know. But the security, you know, will probably be very high, as you know. So you have to really look at different opportunities, creative opportunities. I think social media is a huge piece of a strategy where you don't necessarily have access to your own, to organizing in your own homeland, you know. But the social media piece does. You can reach people. And those bases that are in Turkey, Jordan, and what was the other one I said?
Turkey, Jordan, Europe, Syria,
Georgia,
Israel. Yeah.
all of them. You know, there's a lot of you guys. So I think that's the piece, though, that is really important. I also see some value in linking, you know, with other Indigenous struggles, you know, in a solidarity framework. It's important to do that. As you define more the fact that that is your homeland. You've been there, you know, since Creator put you there, and you were displaced from there, you know, by the nation state of Russia. And I think it's important to continue down that path. So there's opportunity, you know, in May, which I think is a really critical permanent forum on Indigenous issues. This year, the permanent forum on Indigenous issues, the thematic, or the theme, is about the doctrine of discovery. It's about the Papa Bull, you know, and all these documents of conquest, manifest destiny, you know, that have been utilized by America, by Russia, you know, by New Zealand, by Australia, to dispossess, to displace, and to expropriate lands from the, you know, original people of those lands the world over. And so that's a good opportunity too to reach out to some other folks. Is going to the Permanent Forum, you know, across the way in May, and checking that out and doing some networking there, and also elevating the issue, you know, and finding some allies that can help in the escalation. But I do think that as a recommendation, I would recommend that you link up with the Ruckus Society, who's our crew that we work with. They do amazing direct action trainings. You know, we've got trainers all over the country that would love to work with you guys. I would also recommend connecting with SmartMe, which is a great little activist shop. You know, they don't, you know, they work, they're a nonprofit, but they do media trainings on narrative story-based telling strategies. And I strongly suggest that, you know, we all go to the Olympics in London, raise hell there, you know, on the path to the Sochi Olympics. And I think that, you know, just continue to do what you do. Like I said, you know, at the beginning, it's so inspiring when I encounter a group, you know, that has their elders in the group. You know, when these elder men walked in, it was very nice to see the young people stand up in a proper way, acknowledge their elders, to shake their hands, you know. That's how it's done where I come from. You know, we recognize our elders, our aunties, our uncles. There's protocol, you know, and at the same time, as young people, you know, when we have the support of our community, of our leaders, of our aunties and uncles, and our parents, our grandparents, you know, we are very, I don't want to say vicious, but effective, you know, empowered. And so whatever this is that you're doing, keep doing that, because that's what's going to really win it, you know, is community, and building that community no matter where your organizing strategy is happening. And the other, finally, in conclusion, and I'll answer any other questions, but just in conclusion, it's really important, especially living here in America, to understand the significance and importance of organizing in a strategy that is firmly rooted in an anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-oppression framework. This is absolutely integral to success, and not getting bogged down in the typical divisive things that, you know, typically fracture our movements. Absolutely important. And so, I mean, just by having me here, though, you guys are already kind of walking on that path anyway. So.
But also Circassians have something also we're trying to build here. We're trying to create a national movement that can bring back repatriation, rebuilding the nation, and doing things like that. And that is, in the past 2 years, this has been very, so much materializing and crystallizing, at least within our group here, in a way that we were able to somehow get other people in different parts of the world to sympathize with us and then work in parallel at times with our work. The two important things. I'm sure you have somehow approached the IOC and in many different ways, in many different attempts, somehow either to dissuade them or to convince them to do things other than what was planned and actually what eventually happened in Vancouver. How, first of all, how effective was that? What were your objectives and how much you were able to achieve? And what were the responses? We need to understand this technicality of approaching the IOC, again, from the perspective of Circassians in an effective, practical way, learning from your mistakes, if any, and from the disadvantages that you have, so we can now approach it with a different angle, with much more seasoned approach as a Circassian one, based on the experience of the Native Americans. That's one. Second is, how much were you able to utilize or base any of your work on the so-called Indigenous People Declaration of Rights of the United Nations? As you know, and you mentioned something that would have to get our consent, and one of the articles in that declaration, I don't I believe it's number 19 or 18. It says that you cannot do anything in the native people's land unless you consult with them and you have their consent, not only the ones who live in that land, but also the ones who live in diaspora. How much of that were you able to understand? And these are the two focal points of our struggle, if you will, now. We're focusing on these two issues. Anyway, so if you can just shed some light for us so we could understand these 2 points.
I think it's important to always, you know, follow protocols of escalation. And part of that, at least from where I'm coming from, is it's important to engage the IOC. At the bare minimum, to let them know your intentions, and to let them know, you know, what your demands are in terms of, you know, the fact that this history of this land is being suppressed. The government of Russia is, you know, continuing to profit off the natural resource base while eliminating opportunity for the people to come back to that land, continuing to oppress the people that are there. You know, what the heck? Let them know. In Canada, because there was multiple groups, including, you know, the 4 host nations, it really diminished the intervention and engagement of grassroots groups with the IOC. And so, while people let them know at the beginning what their demands, their concerns were, and what the demands were, that's about as far as it got, because the IOC turned around and said, well, we're working with these 4 First Nations over here. They took a bunch of money from us. That's who we're working with. Sorry. They tell us that you guys are a bunch of radicals. So, you know, and which I know doesn't answer your question, but that's what happened. And so I think that it comes down to having, I don't know what the governance structure is right now in your homelands, how the leadership works, but I think, you know, in the time from now till then, it's important to have a really unified position with your leadership back in the homeland, as well as bases from, you know, bases, you know, who are living in what's the word you're using? The diaspora?
Diaspora.
Yeah, in the diaspora. You know, it's important to develop a declaration. You know, I would even, I don't know what the resources are, what your opportunities are, but I would, you know, consider having a forum, you know, where leadership and grassroots people can come together from your different regions to develop a declaration, you know, and have that be your organizing framework of engaging IOC. At least then you have something that can mobilize. I mean, you might already have this, I don't know. That'll give you something to work with, to share with not just other people from your nation, but also other nations, other social movements, you know, to be able to support that, you know, in a campaign on IOC. And I would suggest getting that on, you know, there are some insane platforms now, change.org, you know, Avaz. Now, I know there's not a lot that comes from signature petition campaigns, but you need to have that going on with your position and build the base of international solidarity and support. And if that doesn't exist yet, then you need to get that going, because it just lends more credibility to when you approach IOC. We have this nation, this nation, this nation.
50,000 signatures.
We have 50,000 signatures. It's the governments of this country, that country who have recognized the genocide. Line them up, and that'll, you know, that'll give you more moral authority in intervening with the IOC. Well, at the same time, I would suggest escalating a strategy of nonviolent direct action. You know, start with small framing actions, build them up a little bigger, build them up a little bigger. You know, take them down a bit, go back up until you get there, and then it's the big showdown.
Your experience, though, with the IOC, was it minimized because of the indifference, so to speak, among the nations in approaching the IOC, or that you just did not feel that you could put like a strong pressure on them at that
There
time?
were just too many moving parts, too many groups, you know, of grassroots groups. And then you had the 4 host nations empowered by the Assembly of First Nations, our national Native American organization, that were working, that had signed a memorandum of agreement with IOC. And, you know, that was used as a conquer and divide tactic. I think that you have to, at this point, start to diversify. I think that, you know, London 2012 presents a very important opportunity, but I also think the G20s present a very important opportunity. I think that every opportunity you have to engage the Russian Federation or government is an important opportunity. And so it's important to have your Olympic campaign, but I really think that you need to have your campaign to make this genocide unforgotten, you know, to deal with the propaganda machinery of the Russian government, you know, and to really, you know, start diversifying it on that level, which requires money, you know, and resources.
What was your approach to the Declaration of Indigenous People Rights, United Nations? How did you factor that in your struggle, if you will, somehow? And what were the results and what were the methods used?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know the timeline. I don't think the declaration was adopted at that point.
2006. It was adopted 2006.
Not by Canada, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, Canada was.
Canada
But
was a little
this is the
hesitant.
United Nations, though.
I understand, but I'm just saying that Canada did not endorse the UN declaration until, like, I think after the Olympics. But forgive me, I don't know the timing on that. You have to understand that our government is extremely right-wing and in absolutely no way recognizes the rights of our people. As a matter of fact, today our Prime Minister met with over 400 chiefs from 400 different First Nations, and, you know, basically it was supposed to be a consultation, but he just basically laid down what they were going to do. It was already predetermined, and now he's on a plane to Europe somewhere. So the point that I'm getting at is that, yes, we use the language of free, prior, and informed consent in all of our press, in all of our negotiations with our own leadership, you know, our native leadership that decided to work with the IOC, to work with the government. But it really didn't gain a lot of traction, you know, because of our government does not recognize or has not implemented at a policy, at a state policy level, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's correct.
Also, you mentioned something that might be of a great benefit to us. The IOC came to you and he says, you guys are radical, I have 4 nations signed off on this and give them money and whatever. Now, the government, we have 3 governments in the Caucasus today. In the historical Circassia, separated in 3 different republics. And these are puppet governments of Moscow, of course. And they will at one time, I anticipate, sign to the IOC some declaration saying, along with some our international organization of Circassian, that we are welcoming the IOC here and we have no problem with this. What would you have done now differently to address that situation in retrospect in Canada? How would you have encountered these people who consented and took money from the IOC now if you had the ability to do it over again, so we could benefit from this?
In foresight? Well, I think that it comes down to, you know, that, again, you had multiple groups who were very underfunded, many not funded at all, who came together for an Olympic convergence. Many different platforms under the banner, No Olympics on Stolen Native Land. Now, in foresight, what I would have done is I would have pulled together, I would have invested resources at a much earlier stage in the game, pulled local leadership together, grassroots leadership, and had them develop a statement of unity, how they were going to work together towards the Olympics, during the Olympics, and wrap up after the Olympics. We tried to do that as IEN, but got pushback from the local organizing committee. So we're kind of like, we got this, you come with everybody else, it's all good. Because, you know, 3-4 months before the Olympics, you know, it was our recommendation to the Olympic Resistance Committee that the Olympics are happening, okay? They're not going to be stopped at this point in the stage, and it's important to change the strategy at this point. You know, it can't be no Olympics on stolen native land anymore. It should now focus on the corporate targets. You know, in other words, Suncor Energy is investing in destroying the homelands of Cree and Dene people in Alberta, and now they're supporting this event, this sporting spectacle that's supposed to represent peace and, you know, harmony and, you know, all that good stuff, happy days, you know. But we respected the local organizing protocols of the local group and didn't impose our ideology or our strategies on them. You know, as I mentioned earlier, there were challenges in terms of facilitating unity and solidarity in a joint strategy. For us, I felt that a lot of the groups just went right into the Olympics with the No Olympics on Stolen Native Land, which weakened their position. It would have been a far more powerful position to specifically target Chrysler, to specifically target CNR, like Canadian National Railroad, with direct actions, to specifically target infrastructure that's owned by Petro-Canada and Suncor, with nonviolent direct actions, occupations, you know, to develop materials on these entities, with the biggest investor in the Olympics being Royal Bank of Canada. You know, I really seen, you know, I would have coordinated a national day of action against the Royal Bank of Canada, had banks all across the country occupied by people, you know, who are opposed to the Royal Bank investing in the Canadian tar sands, or having the Olympics running on the dirtiest form of energy on the planet, you know, in a time of climate change. Like, there's a bunch of different angles there that we would have loved to have invested in, but we didn't have the time, unfortunately.
So in an indirect attack, perhaps maybe it would be more effective today in retrospect. Like if we attack the financial institutions that are going to support the Sochi Olympics, would be, in your view today, more effective than the direct declarations of No Sochi Olympics and things like that?
No. I think that you need to, you know, your most high-profile campaign has been your No Sochi campaign. You don't have any of the campaigns from what I've seen. What I'm saying though is that don't get caught 6 months out from the Sochi Olympics. You know, and if you're not able through other interventions, through diversifying your strategy, don't go into the Sochi Olympics saying no Sochi Olympics. Go into the Sochi Olympics saying, why are these profiteers of the Sochi Olympics profiteering and suppressing the fact that our people have been removed from our homeland, that Russia committed a genocide, killing 1.8 million of our people, and what the hell? Because you need to use that as a launching step to continue your campaign. Okay? I think that I mean, I'm not a lawyer by any sense of it. But what I would say is that having a diverse, multi-pronged strategy is really important. You need to have an organizing strategy, you know, not just here in New Jersey and New York, but with your bases in other countries as well. They all need to be able to respond you know, I think it's important that you might want to set a target for an international day of action this year, you know, maybe during the London Olympics. We'll be doing an international day of action against BP during the London Olympics. You know, so we'll have actions going off probably in about 10 different countries. It'll be little, but the fact that 10 actions against BP that get in the media in 10 different countries is going to freak the hell out of BP. Just as this will freak the hell out of the IOC. It'll let them know you're there. And the next year it'll be bigger. You know, that coupled with interventions at the London 2012 Games, at the G20, and other, you know, international fora where you can get into direct encounters with representatives of the Russian government, as well as identifying who the corporate sponsors are, and start hitting them up too. And it doesn't have to be a direct action per se. You can develop mini websites that just, you know, make fun of their logos, do little culture jams on them, talk about the fact that, you know, put your history on there, talk about the company's human rights record, highlight other statistics of other regions that those companies have exploited where they might have violated human rights. The point is that you wanna be able to have diverse strategies. So some will move you forward, some might not work, and it's important to have a very strong evaluative model attached to each of your strategies to evaluate, is this the best use of our limited resources? Are we leveraging in the right leverage points to advance our cause better? But I do suggest branching out from just IOC, and I do suggest branching out from just the Russian government. These are your primary targets, especially with the Sochi campaign, but I think it's important to diversify, to start targeting the corporate powers, and to really look at the narrative-based strategy, which is the strategy that's going to empower your base. Developing those stories, do a media project, you know, interview your elders, you know, talk about the history, get that to your young people in all those countries. Do it through the web, do it through Facebook, Twitter, you know, and that is really, you know, once you instill like history, it's like power, you know, and
in terms of rallying, continuing to rally people throughout these, you know, these milestones that we go through up until the Olympics.
Mhm.
So, what's your idea of these certain points of rallying?
Well, you need to, well, I would suggest that, I mean, you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt because you're in a much different situation than Vancouver and Indigenous folks in Canada were in terms of, you know, just the geographical challenges that you face are very different.
So just to make it maybe even clearer as a question then, as you were presented to it in Vancouver with our movement, what do we have to do and what should we not do, you know, some of these things in London possibly, that will take us to the next level?
Well, I think London, you know, I got about as much understanding of what the ground looks like in London as you all do.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in some contact with some folks that are doing Olympic mobilization, but they're just at a very early stage, and it's pretty late in the
Yeah.
game.
It's very chaotic.
That said, there's a bunch of small groups, you know, including like East London folks whose, you know, homes have been expropriated through eminent domain for the building of Olympian sites, you know, like homeowners. They always take it away from them. Parks privatized and bulldozed, turned into, like, you know, public common spaces turned into Olympic spaces, you know, private spaces. I mean, it's all the same stuff going on.
In the last couple of years that you've been working, what's been your, I guess, reaction from different politicians? You know, have you engaged any type of specific politician? What have your strategies been? Do you get any feedback whatsoever? I mean, I'm not just talking about inside Canada, possibly, you know, different parties outside of Canada as well. Do you guys work that way at all?
Absolutely. You know, I've been operating in Brussels and DC and in Ottawa now for the last 3 years on a regular basis. And in Europe, you know, we've been organizing in multiple countries with companies that are operating in the Canadian tar sands. So that's the Netherlands, Royal Dutch Shell. That's France with France's oil giant Total-Fina. That's the UK with both Shell and BP. And that's Scotland with the Royal Bank of Scotland, one of the biggest financiers of the Canadian tar sands. And so we've engaged those companies in their own backyards because of our extremely right-wing government, and they're just they just do not, you know, listen. But we've been engaged with European members of Parliament as well over a piece of legislation called the Fuel Quality Directive, which is a piece of transport legislation which provides a different administrative qualification to tar sands fuel, which is dirtier, higher in sulfur, and you know, other nasty things, more CO2 when you burn it. And this piece of legislation would effectively ban tar sands from Europe, okay? So it's now in law, but it's being evaluated. So it's an ongoing campaign. Excuse me. MEPs, you get the full spectrum. Some are really into us, you know. Social Democrats, yeah, kind of into us. The Greens love us, you know. But then you get the ultra right-wing party members in the EU. They freaking hate us. They love oil, you know. They hate Mother Earth.
When you guys were lobbying, did you personally like directly lobby them, or were you ever approached? Like how was the relationship formed? Okay.
Both. I've been approached by members of EU Parliament and U.S. Congress to coordinate tours and meetings with First Nations leadership in the tar sands. You know, we have actually I got approached by the one of the leadership candidates of the federal opposition party. We're organizing a tour of the tar sands and a meeting with First Nations leaders for Nathan Cullen, who's the member of parliament for the Skeena Valley Bulkley district, which is where they want to build the Enbridge Gateway Pipeline, another massive tar sands pipeline in British Columbia. February 1st, take them up to the tar sands. So both, you know, we approach them when it's tact, when it's strategic, and they approach us when it's strategic.
Let's go to Lisa.
I just want to ask you some things. It's a little bit off topic, but our two biggest limitations here with our movement would be number one, human capital, and then number two, finances. You know, we really can't do as much as we'd like to do and diversify the different campaigns because of our limitations. Now, we don't have any full-time activists. Basically, everything that we do is on a volunteer basis. Now, what are some things that you do to engage people to get them to help you out on a volunteer basis, but then also with fundraising so that we can get money coming in?
Well, okay. Well, in terms of like to engage people, I listed a bunch of stuff already, but just to recap, I would just say that it's important to create space for people to come together. And the number one way to get people together is food. I don't care what culture you're from. You know, hook up some food, get people together. Like when I need to like get some banners painted, like tonight, I call up the pizza shop. And I get the good pizza, not the bad pizza. I get good pizza, and I'm like, I need some pizza. And I call a bunch of people, and I say, who's hungry? Come over. I got pizza, and they come over, and they're all like, "Oh, this is great." And I'm like, "Oh, well, hey, I gotta paint this banner," and that's how I get stuff done. So bribery, you know, quickest way to people's hearts is through their tummy, man or woman, I don't care. But you can only buy so many pizzas, right? I think what it comes down to though is like when you create those spaces that, and you know, you gotta have things inspiring. You gotta have your narrative down. You know, you gotta have your pitch down, and that goes with recruitment, and that also goes with funding. You know, you can write your proposals, but when it comes down to it, most foundations don't let you they don't solicit a proposal from you. I mean, they don't let you like cold call them. You know, most foundations require them to send you a letter, like a letter first, and you know, inviting you to submit a proposal. And by that point, the decision's already made. They're going to give you some money. All right, that's for most foundations, most donors as well. I think it's important that in any fundraising strategy, you gotta always approach the foundations, approach donors, but also fundraise in your community. You know, have a bingo. Seriously. You know, little things first. You know, have a dance or have a feast, have a movie screening. You know, these things are really important. And although you might only make $100 or $500, it's important to do that stuff as well to practice getting your pitch down. Because whoever's raising money for you, you have to be able to, in a compelling way, emotionally engage a partner, and a funder is a partner. You know, they're funding you because they believe in what you're saying. So,
It's actually in regards to the story you were talking about earlier about the grandmother who got arrested and eventually died in prison due to pneumonia. What would you say to people who see that as a deterrent to take action? Like who say, this happened to her, it can happen to me, I better not get involved?
I would say, well, I respect your decision, and I find the next person who would be like, that really pisses me off, and I'm going to take action. I think that's an important story to be told regardless of people's reactions. Just like, you know, like genocide, man, the G word, I mean, it's a heavy word. People react to that, and not in a positive way, but it needs to be told, okay? We, you know, when we talk about our people, we don't sugarcoat what's happened here in North America. 100 million Indigenous peoples died here, you know, since 1490 whatever. And we don't sugarcoat that, you know, that happened. People need to go through a process of reconciliation. And the path forward to there is first they gotta acknowledge it, you know. Even we are not there after 500 years, you know what I mean? This country still celebrates Columbus Day. Like, what the hell is that? He was a genocidal maniac.
Just going back to culture and in terms of the Olympics, how soon into the game of planning for the Vancouver Olympics was the culture and the Indigenous people brought into the planning stages of planning the Olympics in Vancouver?
I'd say about 4 months out.
4 months, but I know that the symbol, the logo of the Vancouver Olympics.
Oh, you mean the Inukshuk?
Yeah.
Oh, that was like a year before. Yeah.
But was there talks of including the Indigenous element prior to?
Yeah, they didn't start planning it though until like people didn't get the invitations to come and dance in front of those big 4 totem poles or whatever until like a week before, you know.
Okay.
It was really symbolic too that one of them failed. I don't know for those of you that watched.
Yeah.
One of them broke and didn't go up. It was very symbolic. It's like Crater was like, I'm not on your side.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because we find our people in our homeland in the diaspora saying, oh, they're going to call us up and then we're going to be able to put on performance or something. And I was wondering, those performances that were put on during the games, do the people who participated in it, do you find what they're saying that it was a good thing, or what was their reaction to the level of their involvement in the participation of the Olympic Games, and what kind of legacy do they think that they put into, like, after the games all wrapped up, after the world didn't put their focus on Vancouver anymore?
Yeah, do they look back on it as being like a good thing, something beneficial?
No, I can't tell you exactly what every single person who did a performance feels, but for most of the people that I've talked to, they have extreme shame. They're totally ashamed. So they didn't get no money. They're still in the same position they're in. I don't know what your people going through back home, but you know, things are really hard for Native people in Canada.
Yeah, you have to be understanding.
You know. Yeah, so just like, I can only give you my observation, and my observation from the people that I talk to is it's still a very sore spot. Anybody who danced in that opening ceremony, you bring it up with them, and they just, you know, they're shamed.
We had one of our national dance ensembles do a commercial for the Sochi and Vancouver Olympics. Yeah. And it was not accepted very well, of course, throughout the diaspora, including the big parts of Turkey, here, and in Europe.
Even in the homeland.
And they did it in the homeland and everything. So, like, you know, it would be, you know, maybe for us to find out, to contact those people, to see thus far how they feel about participating in that, and you know, get a closer look at, because they're probably one of the only top media, you know, like Circassian, genuine Circassian look in the Vancouver Olympics and Sochi Olympics as a commercial. You know.
I'll give you another observation though to cap off that, and that is that a lot of those people that participated in those ceremonies and dances and stuff, their traditional regalia, that I've talked to, yeah, they felt shame, you know, they felt like they sold out, they did. But it also compelled them to make up for it, because now a whole lot of those young people are like wicked active on the Tar Sands campaign, or have gotten active on other, justice campaigns, you know, for Indigenous rights, and they're really like, it kind of resulted in a lot of them getting really politicized because they never thought that it would be political, but then, you know, not everybody's as kind of, I guess, objective as I'm being. So they got a lot of shit, you know, a lot of people were like, sell out, you know, I didn't take that money.
The opposite
You know?
thing might happen here, because some people actually are with this idea as a promoting for our culture, which is
Well, so,
a
no,
lot of percentage.
that's right, though, I think that it's exactly the same.
But some people will be like, oh, let them dance, let them present our culture in this line. They don't even understand the concept of the whole, like, what we're talking about, the whole thing we were talking about. They're like, oh, we're promoting our Circassian culture in a very huge stage as Olympics. And the people really don't understand that this is wrong. What are you going to do with these people?
I just have one last question. It's been a long talk. Thank you so much for everything, by the way. When the four host nations, when the IOC approached the four host nations to sign off and to participate and to be supportive, did the IOC make this move because they felt pressure from the anti-Olympic feeling that was growing out of the Indigenous groups, or did they go ahead and do that beforehand? Was it, do you see what I'm saying? Was it a cause and effect type of thing?
I would say that, you know, I don't know the answer to how the flow of that decision came, but I would say that it probably came from the government, you know, as a suggestion. I don't think the IOC probably developed that strategy, although I did hear that IOC put a tremendous amount of pressure to have First Nations as the face of Olympics. And, you know, you brought up the Inukshuk, that stone statue on the beach. Did you guys make it down there? Is it the big one?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, they like built this like big version of it on the beach. And that just pissed everybody off, especially because it was straight up racist. Because the Inukshuk is the symbol for Inuit people who are not First Nations, they're the Arctic people, you know, like, they have nothing to do with BC, like, at all. They're like thousands of miles away from BC. It's like, that'd be like some like take your most northern person from Siberia and be like, yeah, we're gonna take your like most sacred cultural item and make that the emblem of this,
Actually, they've done it. They've taken the Cossacks, who were the tool of the Russians to kill the Circassians, and dressed them in our traditional clothing and made them the symbol of Sochi.
Yeah, they've also taken the generals that
Sochi
participated in the war.
They're building memorials to commemorate these generals who took part of the genocidal policy. And not only that, but they implement this imagery, that, like this symbolism that represents a genocide. Like some medals that are very similar to the medals that they gave to the generals that were committing the genocide. So this is how insulting it is to us. I mean, it's on a very subliminal level. I don't know if it's intentional on their part or not, but this is what we're facing.
yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty impossible sometimes, the things that we have to deal with, but I would say this, you know, just to kind of wrap things up, if I may. You know, I myself as an individual, you know, our network, you know, we look forward to helping, you know, support, you know, your struggle, and definitely appreciate, you know, the support and the good words. You know, I keep in touch with many of y'all on Facebook, and those of you that I am not on Facebook with, if you Facebook, please add me. You know, it'll be a interesting thing if you guys can identify resourcing, you know, to expand, and take little steps. You know, I would start with some of the web-based stuff. You know, not everything costs money. You know, it just takes the human resource time, but just little steps. You know, and I think that for us, like I said, you know, we're very interested in London 2012, and anything I can do to help and support, you know, with activities in London, you know, let me know, And you know, we've got a big crew in London, mostly climate justice activists, but I think the corporate profile piece is absolutely critical to gaining more allies. Okay? So, you know, you talked about the fact, you know, that there's an incredibly huge resource base, I think, which may not have been the official reason why Russia did what they did, but it's definitely the reason why they continue to maintain the situation as it is. And so it's important to identify what are the primary resources, what are the extractive industries operating there. Are there Western operators? You know, are there Canadian-based mining companies there? Are there
BP's there.
There's BP. Well, that's what I'm saying. Develop the corporate profile, because then you know what that's going to do? That's going to bring the full hammer of the UK Climate Justice Network down, working with you all. Okay, so that's what I mean. So big deal if there's no big Olympic mobilization in London this time around like it was in Vancouver. If you come in on the attack on BP, there's going to be thousands of people taking action on BP during the Olympics. Okay, so just a couple suggestions anyway. But I'd really like to thank you all anyway for having me here today, and you know, I especially want to thank my friend here for picking me up at the airport and taking me for that delicious meal.
You said it's the food, didn't you?
I did.
We recruited you with the food.